This is the 15-inch MacBook Air, the newest version of the M2 powered Air, and in my opinion, there are a lot of misconceptions about what this laptop can and can't do. While the M2 Air does have its limitations, there seems to be a lot of confusion surrounding what this machine is actually capable of, and after using it for the past couple of months, I can safely say that some of the narratives surrounding this model don't really resemble use in the real world. Today, I'm diving into my time with the 15-inch M2 MacBook Air, going over what's been good, bad, and debunking some myths along the way, so if you're interested in the 15-inch Air, you're looking to pick one of these up, or you just want to know more about all these fun little details, stick around and let's get into it. Hey everyone, Kyle Erickson here. I've been using the 15-inch M2 MacBook Air for a couple of months now after having used the 13-inch model for about a year or so, and during that time I've got a pretty good gauge for what this machine can do and what it can't. This particular version that I've been using is the base model with 256 gigs of storage and 8 gigs of RAM, and when I purchased it I was a little concerned with how limiting it might be. There seem to be folks that either think that the base model is all that you need, or on the flip side that it's not worth it at all, and I think that really comes down to how you're using your MacBook. For myself, the way that I use laptops has changed quite a bit over the last year or so. I used to do everything on my 13-inch MacBook Air, from coding, editing these videos, maybe some lighter 3D modeling, pretty demanding stuff. So I did bump up the specs to 16 gigs of RAM and a 512 gig SSD on that MacBook, but early this year I offloaded a lot of that work to dedicated desktop machines like the Mac Mini and Mac Studio, so my MacBook turned into something that I use more for casual things only, which is likely going to mirror what most folks end up using the base M2 Air for. Like all MacBooks, it's got a solid build construction with an aluminum housing. The model that I have here is silver in color, but you can also get this in space gray, midnight, and starlight. I got this in silver this go around just because I think that it's the best for stuff like fingerprints, which it doesn't really show at all, and in the event that I do scratch it, it's not going to stick out as much as something like midnight would. It's reasonably light for a 15-inch laptop weighing in at 3.3 pounds. There are definitely laptops out there around this size that are lighter, but it is the thinnest 15-inch laptop out there at 11.5 millimeters. Having a MacBook this size, I'd say, is the perfect combination of size and portability. I've taken this with me on a couple of trips now, and it's been a much more pleasant experience than something like the 16-inch Pro that's bigger and heavier and just feels a touch clunkier. And likewise, it's much nicer having a bit extra screen real estate versus a 13-inch Air. This is technically a 15.3-inch screen, and it's been great for watching content, especially when I've been away from home and the only other option that I've had is to watch reruns of 90 Day Fiancé on a hotel TV.
Other than that, everything's perfect.
This display has 500 nits peak brightness, P3 wide color, and overall has great image quality and color. The blacks are deep and uniform for an IPS panel, and the contrast is outstanding at about 1400 to 1 on this display, where anything above around 1200 to 1 on an IPS panel is very good. That makes this ideal for not only watching content, but if you're doing any color precise work like photo or video editing or graphic design, you can count on this to have an accurate color representation with whatever it is that you're working on. Outside color, you have a little more breathing room versus smaller screen sizes when it comes to different interfaces. Say if you're working on something with multi-panel UI like Xcode or other code editors, or design and photo apps as well, where it does reduce the clutter a touch and feel a little bit more natural. Just speaking to some of those use cases, this is where I see the M2 MacBook Air get misrepresented a lot. You'll see a lot of discourse online saying that this base machine isn't usable and that it doesn't have enough RAM for most tasks. And I've honestly never found that to be the case, provided that you're not expecting this to do everything under the sun. Like I said, these days I'm using my MacBook more in a casual manner. For me, that means viewing content, working in productivity tools, maybe some photo editing here and there. And lately I've been getting back into web and mobile software development. With programming, I'm not using anything out of this world, but mainly just trying to retain my skill set a bit there and make sure that I don't get too rusty. So those projects are going to be somewhat simple in that sense. And with photo editing, it's been great for when I go away on trips and want to edit pictures when I'm in a hotel room. And in all of these cases, the base 15-inch Air has been completely fine. It is important to note that the base 15-inch comes with a better chip than the 13-inch base, where you'll see an 8-core CPU and 10-core GPU on the 15, and an 8-core CPU and GPU on the 13-inch model, so you do get a little boost in that regard. Now, if I try and do multiple tasks at once that use a fair amount of resources, things can slow down for sure, so you do have to keep your work somewhat focused without running too much at once. And outside of that, I do occasionally get warnings from Clean My Mac saying that I'm running out of memory, but most of the time, that's when macOS is going to kick in with memory swapping, and things still work pretty seamlessly for the most part. There's no reason for me to try and edit any of these videos or dig into Final Cut Pro or any of those kind of apps unless there's some kind of catastrophic failure on my desktop Macs. So that's not something that I really touch on the 15-inch Air. I think if you're doing a bunch of video work and stuff where you know you're going to require a lot of RAM, you're best served to at least bump up the specs or choose one of the Pro models. I worked off the 13-inch doing some fairly demanding tasks with increased RAM and storage, but you can get a lot done just with this base model. So just be aware that this particular configuration isn't meant to be a pro-level one-size-fits-all machine. I just think it's important to remember that. In terms of that storage capacity, 256 gigs isn't a lot. It'll get you by just fine if you're not storing a ton of apps or large files or photos, and while the drive speed is about half as fast as the storage options above it, in the real world it's very hard to notice any difference between them. At 256 gigs max capacity, you're probably not dealing with large enough file transfers to make a reasonable distinction in the actual speed from the configurations above it. Another thing that folks get hung up on is the fanless design, which again I've had zero issues with in any of my M series MacBook Airs that I've owned. Sure, they can get warm, but I've never felt anything was harmful to my system or causing any impactful decrease in performance. The 15-inch Air does disperse heat a little bit better than the 13, having a larger surface area to spread that heat out across. I haven't felt it get overly hot, and I've never really been concerned about heat personally. I do find it a little bit strange that there's such an apprehension to a fanless design, given that we're literally walking around with fanless computers in our pockets without any issues. I know they are not as powerful, but on the flip side, the MacBook has a much larger surface area and better conditions to disperse heat, and I really don't think that you need to worry about it, at least not to the extent that some folks think you do. With the size comes a bunch of other benefits as well. The sound in here is outstanding with the 6-speaker surround system with force-canceling woofers. These are great for listening to music and watching content. Oftentimes in situations where I'd previously use a Bluetooth speaker, like when I film B-roll and throw on a podcast when I'm filming, I won't even bother with that anymore just due to how good the audio is out of the Air. The sound is very crisp and clear, there's a lot of depth, and regardless of which type of audio you're listening to, it's almost hard to believe it's coming out of a machine that's this thin and compact, and I really could not ask for more there. I'm able to play podcasts or music on it all day, which is in large part due to the battery life. Apple says that the battery life is good for up to 18 hours of watching Apple TV and 15 hours if you're surfing the worldwide internet. So exactly the same as what's listed for the 13-inch model. There's likely no scenario in the real world where you're gonna see that length of battery life, but it's still outstanding. In most situations, I've been able to work on the M2 Air all day without ever having to worry about my battery dying, and in general, it does seem to last longer than the 13-inch model. If I have the screen set to not go to sleep and I run audio through this continually, or if I'm coding for extended periods of time, it gets through a full 8-hour workday no problem, and I find that the standby time is excellent as well. If I'm working on something, I can just close this up and come back to it a day or two later, and the battery percentage seems to remain at relatively the same level. Even using the public beta of macOS Sonoma, where beta versions historically have been very bad for battery life, it's remained quite impressive. The only time where I see any substantial power draw is if the CPU is running at full throttle for an extended period of time, or if I have accessories connected, things like external SSDs and USB hubs, which you may have to use at some point, given this doesn't have a ton of storage and only 2 USB-C ports. It would have been nice if there were more than 2 ports given the size of this MacBook, but I'm mostly fine with it. They're both Thunderbolt 3 and USB 4 compatible, so great speed on those. You can actually run some external SSD drives faster than the internal one from those ports, and the nice thing is, even with a lack of options there, the Air does have a MagSafe charger, so you don't have to use up a USB-C for charging. I'm mainly using everything wirelessly with the Air outside of SSD storage, which probably helps to keep those ports open. It comes with Bluetooth 5.3 and Wi-Fi 6, and I haven't had any issues with Bluetooth dropping packets or Wi-Fi cutting out or dropping signal. Wi-Fi 6 on the M2 Air definitely isn't as fast on my Wi-Fi 6E system, with it not having the 6 GHz band that's available on the Pro models, but it still maintains a strong signal strength and decent speed, and most people likely won't notice a difference. Honestly, I don't have a lot to complain about with a 15-inch M2 MacBook Air. The build quality is outstanding, you're getting more screen real estate, a better trackpad, better sound system, and what seems to be a bit better battery life than the 13-inch version, and it's only $100 more than the equivalent in the 13-inch model, which to me makes this a no-brainer if you're looking at the Air. The base model is a great little machine for most people, I would say, especially if you're just using this casually around the house, browsing the web or watching content, or even with lighter workloads like using office or productivity software, lighter graphic design, photo editing, that kind of thing. You can do all those things on here without feeling too much lag. That said, if you do want to get into some of those heavier workflows like video editing, you want to multitask with multiple demanding workflows, or store large files or apps, bumping up the RAM to 16 gigs and the storage to 512 does go a long way. I think the important thing to take away is just to define how you use your MacBook and determine what is going to be the most suitable for you without dealing in absolutes in terms of if something is worth it or not. With that said, I would love to hear from you guys on this. If you're going to pick up an Air or you've got either the 13 or 15 inch version, which did you choose and why? Let me know in the comments down below. As always, I hope you found this video useful or entertaining. If you did, feel free to hit that like button. If you want to see more tech related content or get together and try and lick our own elbows while balancing spoons on our noses, please subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next upload.